there's too many people in power who are rejecting this notion that the cartels operate in Canada. They do. I've talked to them. I've seen them. They are running so much of their operation in that your northern neighbor that it would just be ridiculous to say it's untrue. And unfortunately, the Canadian justice system is just too weak to do anything about it because they don't even deal with domestic crime properly and domestic offenders properly. So I would just never see them actually dealing with Mexican cartel operatives or associates in Canada.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Welcome to Borderland Narcosis, an Ironclad original presented by First Form. Don't forget to check out your First Form products at firstform.com/Borderland. Our next guest is the one and only Katarina Szulc. She's here to talk about some new news that's going on between U.S. and Mexico, and as well, some exciting news for you guys. You know, the last few months, there's been a lot going on with U.S. Mexico, kind of a standoff between them. And I'm very curious to kind of see what your thoughts are on some of it. One of the biggest things right now, it was pretty viral, is Mexico's president said that she rejected Trump's plan to send U.S. troops across the border. And then Trump actually kind of said that's true. Tell me what you're thinking about that. What's going on and what's kind of the conversation happening in Mexico with this?
Look, it's really complicated to sort of clarify this or ever really talk about what the Mexican president is doing when it comes to Trump trying to strong arm her, particularly when it comes to sending in troops or military aid in terms of tackling the narco problem, right? Because at the end of the day, even though we see Claudia Sheinbaum publicly rejecting Trump's notions in terms of we are going to go into Mexico and we're going to handle this narco shit ourselves. In practice, there is a military sea vessel in the port of Veracruz right now from the United States that is most definitely tracking cartel activity in these ports, which we know to see a lot of drug trafficking and precursor importing. So at the end of the day, I think it's really interesting because we see Claudia Sheinbaum publicly rejecting the United States or Trump when it comes to any talk about military action or this foreign intervention into Mexico to tackle the narco crisis. But in practice, we're seeing the complete opposite. A lot of the time, they really are accepting the help. I mean, at the end of the day, the Green Berets are in Mexico multiple times a year, training Mexican special forces, teaching them new techniques, how to better be equipped to deal with a new and improved narco war because they're using drones. They have, explosive devices that they're making at home and miniguns. Like they've really stepped up their game. And so for them, they kind of need the US's help in terms of dealing with the new technology that they're using. But publicly, Claudia Sheinbaum will always protect Mexico's sovereignty. And I understand that. I think it's completely fair. And I think that if I was the Mexican president, obviously certainly not qualified to do that, but I would do the same thing. You know, I would say we are a sovereign, independent nation, and we don't want the United States coming in to help us out. But she is still accepting that help to a certain extent.
I would counter that and say, why wouldn't you allow the United States to help when they're fully capable of taking out the cartel within weeks, if that? It almost seems as if someone who doesn't allow the United States to support them, you know, and this is like the United States is asking to support them, not take over. And so the idea to me is like, well, shoot, if you and I know how the cartel has kind of destroyed a lot of just the normal living and more normal lifestyles of the Mexican people. And most of the Mexican population, I believe, would like to have a safe place to live. So then you would think the counter would be take out the cartel. Well, how would you do that? Well, Mexico hasn't done it on their own for how long? well, let's see if America can do it. And that's kind of the thinking I have, is like, well, why not allow us to go in there and take care of it? So then it cleans up the streets, it helps Mexico out, and then hopefully, we can let go. I mean, I wouldn't want to see what we do in every other country where we set up a base and all of a sudden we stay there. I think that's probably maybe the thought. But I almost feel like, why wouldn't she just allow the United States military to go in and handle business?
And I completely understand that. And I think that there is a population of Mexicans who also agree with that notion. They when they heard about the FTO designation, for example, they were really excited, perhaps, that finally a global power, a strong government takes their problem seriously and views their problem as something to kind of attack, to fix. Because for a lot of Mexican people, the war on drugs and the whole narco situation has completely depleted their quality of lives. And I understand that to be a major problem, particularly in a lot of states that actually border with the United States, right? So I can certainly see, and a lot of my viewers also have that same sort of perception of, well, if America is willing to do something, why wouldn't the Mexican government be happy to take them in with open arms? But at the end of the day, we have to understand that any sovereign country, particularly a country that perhaps could be intimidated by the United States, and I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for saying that, but really look at it in the grand scheme of things. Any country that is going to say, yeah, US, come on in, deal with our biggest problem, is at risk of at losing a sense of their sovereignty. And that's just a fact, how it is, right? And so, of course, I think for people who are dying, who are seeing their family members go missing, and I know for a lot of us that isn't even the main problem, right? For the American population, the main problem is the fentanyl overdose crisis, and the crimes that we're seeing happening as like a aftermath of the war on drugs, of cartel violence. I think it's important to keep in mind that for a lot of people in Mexico, if they had the chance and the power to make a decision, they would want to put an end to this. I know that for a fact. I mean, I've talked to so many people who just want it over with. But we also still have to keep in mind that the Mexican government is not this, it is not this organic, wholesome government that can really just crack down on the narco problem, because there are so many people in power who are profiting off of it.
That's exactly so. That's the other side of it. I won't say that the President Sheinbaum herself is involved in that, but it starts to lean towards, is she involved as well? Does she have something to gain by not slowing down the cartel? I don't know, but that's the questions that are raised to everyone else who's watching.
Yeah.
And from my position, I care about the fentanyl crisis tremendously. It's a big reason why we have this podcast. But the other side of it, I do care about the humanitarian side of this conversation, where the Mexican people should be living in a safe country. And I know that everyone deserves to have a safe country, if you will. And hearing things, something that you reported on that property that had a lot of burnt, people.
The Rancho Izaguirre in Jalisco.
Yes.
Yeah, the extermination camp by CJ and
yeah, the extermination camp. Yes, thank you. Like things like that are happening. Like I just feel like the Mexican government should be like, hey, as a team, we could use some help. Okay, they don't want to use our help. They don't want to lose their sovereignty. I understand that. I haven't seen them make any decisions that looks like they're making changes tactically, proficiently, anything that's to destroy the cartel. And what it is, and you and I know, why is that? Well, because every law enforcement that they have has a chance of having someone in that group who's potentially corrupted.
100%.
So it almost,
I mean, listen,
Go ahead.
You're mentioning Rancho Izaguirre as a reason for the Mexican government to ask for help in terms of tackling the narco crisis. The Mexican federal government, well, actually, the Fiscalia of Jalisco, which is like this crossover of justice and the attorney general's office in the United States, for example, right? Like that's kind of how the Fiscalia works in Mexico, was there with the National Guard before we ever heard about this, months before. I think they were there in like September. They uncovered that camp. They were on an operation to release some kidnapping victims and arrest some members of organized crime. There was no press release, no further investigation. Nobody looked to the personal belongings that were there. The ovens used to burn people that were underground, like these clandestine extermination ovens. Nobody knew about this until the vigilante group that they're being called now, which is groups of mothers whose children have gone missing in Mexico, because we all know this, right? Mexico has a disappeared persons problem, right? These mothers get tipped off by God knows who to go to this random ranch 58 kilometers outside of Guadalajara in Jalisco. They go there, they find two fucking ovens that are built into the ground that CJ&G was using to kill people, to exterminate people, and typically people that were not being recruited into CJ&G. It was just kidnapping victims or people who were looking for jobs. I mean, at least that's what the investigation says. And so you're asking me, they discovered this camp. Wouldn't they ask for help? They didn't even fucking publish it in the first place. How would you ever expect a government who hides something so devastating to ever ask for help to solve it?
That's the problem, right? That the own government is covering it up. And that's at what, man, it's interesting. There's a lot there, and I'm not gonna start a I'm not gonna start a whole fight over this one. But you're absolutely correct. This is it's insane. Well, let me talk about something here. There's a couple things that you talked about in some of your reporting I thought was fascinating. You said that there was a text message on WhatsApp in Mexican Cartel is offering hits in Canada for $55,000. First of all, how did you find this? You don't have to give any sources, obviously, but how did you come about this? Yeah. Well, how did you come about this? And then exactly like what more did you learn about this? Because this would be interesting for the audience to hear.
So I've been looking into cartel recruitment since, I would say, like basically for exactly a year at this point. I've always found this really interesting. And when I was spending a lot of time in Jalisco, which is CJ&G territory, I had heard rumors and seen some stuff on social media that kind of verified these rumors about how a lot of the cartels, particularly CJ&G and Sinaloa, were using WhatsApp and Facebook to recruit people to the cartels. And, keep in mind, for me, I'm fucking 24 years old. I never even used Facebook, right? But then I decided I need to hop on Facebook, because how are they using this social media platform that typically young people aren't even using? Mistaken, because actually,
that's a little bit of a jab. Hold on, I'm gonna let that go. But
it's not a jab. No, it's only a jab if you take it that way. I'm gonna tell you right now, young people in Mexico are still using Facebook, okay? And for them, that's kind of their main form of social media. It's Facebook, it's WhatsApp, and it's TikTok. Instagram isn't really on the radar like that. I mean, most of them have it, they don't really use it. So there's a lot of group chats on Facebook that can lead you to legit and illegitimate high paying jobs that for a lot of people, I understand, would not realize have to do with organized crime. And it's actually very sad. Okay. Now, for a lot of other people, they know exactly what the fuck they're getting into. And through these Facebook links or TikTok pages are being led into a WhatsApp group chat. Okay. Now, I have had so many people reach out. How do you get in? How do I get in? You know what? Listen, if that's really what you want to do, you can go figure that out for yourself. I do not recommend that. It's just, you don't want to be there, particularly if you're not actually trying to be recruited. I wouldn't recommend you getting into a group chat with a bunch of cartel operatives. trying to get you to join. It's like it's really giving the same thing as ISIS. There's a lot of documentaries about this, what it was like for a lot of people in England, for example, who were getting recruited into ISIS. We see that same thing going on right now in Mexico and in the United States, actually, because they're recruiting all over. Now, they're taking people in, and then through a sort of filter situation. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I did write about a little bit more on my Substack, but it's a little iffy, right? I don't want to burn any of these contacts. So you kind of get filtered through a process. You're in one group to another group. The amount of people starts to go down, and the level of operatives starts to go up. So you end up dealing with higher level cartel operatives by the time you've been vetted, essentially. From that point on, you get moved into Telegram or Signal, where you're being told of dollar amounts and payment methods to basically commit crimes. And so what I thought was interesting was in one of these group chats that I got into, it was the Jalisco cartel, and I saw an Alberta phone number, which is Canada, borders with Montana. Now, I clocked it right away because one of my first journalism jobs, I was working in Edmonton, Alberta at the CBC. And so when I saw that phone number, I was shook to my core, because you're telling me that someone in the prairie province of Canada is willing to work for the cartel. I could never reach that person, so I wouldn't know if they were Canadian, if they were Mexican, if they were a Mexican person who had been born and raised in Canada, or if they were a Mexican national. Of course, I would love to know that, because what is the demographic of people that are internationally being recruited by the cartel? It's crazy. From there, I got in touch with someone who was living in an area really close to where I'm from in Canada, the West Coast, and was offered $55,000 to take out hits on high-level gang operatives in Canada for the cartel, because the cartels are not using Mexican nationals, are not using their operatives that are based in Canada to kill anyone. And I went through basically all the recent gang murders that have happened in recent years. I would say I went back to like 2020, right? In Canada, and really none of the people charged are Mexican nationals. Like, actually none of them. Typically they're Canadian. A lot of them are from the East Coast. They're from Quebec. They have French last names. They're Quebecois. And they're literally working with the cartel. A lot of them have spent a certain amount of time abroad, whether that be in Colombia or Mexico, just in any cartel heavy place where they were either trained or put in touch with, however you want to put it, the right or wrong person to make 55 grand to kill someone.
What's going on, y'all? I'm not sure if you know this, but Borderland Narcosis is sponsored by First Form. First Form is a wellness supplement company, and I've been with them for about 7 years, and I've been with them for that long because I truly believe in not just the product, but the people who own the company. They are a culture that just believes in your health. And so if you guys haven't tried it before, I would recommend you go and check out the Formula One Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Add a little bit of a ignition to that, and you'll have exactly what you need for your post-workout drink. This is something I've used for a very long time. When I'm in the best shape of my life, it's always been because I have a nice regimen of the First Form products. So if you guys are interested, go check them out at firstform.com/Borderland. Okay, use our link. It is the #1 stphorm.com/Borderland. And if you order over $75, you get free shipping. And if you're new to the site, you get a free app for 30 days. So go check it out. Again, thank you so much for all the support. See you soon. It was crazy to hear that in Canada. And then the message that you put out, you shared, included instructions about Glock acquisition, mag counts, ensuring that children weren't present. What does that tell you about the CJNG and like they're as they're evolving?
That they fucking know what they have to do to not get caught and to make sure that whatever hit they're taking out is as clean and professional as possible. It's like Hitman style, right? And the one of the cases that I included in that report, I actually remember it happening. I think I was actually still working as a reporter in Vancouver, where a South Asian gang member was shot execution style in downtown Vancouver, outside of a really nice restaurant by like on the waterfront. And it just so happened that the man who killed him, he was likely. Now I'm not going to say, I'm going to say alleged, because in the court documents they don't specify that this individual worked for the cartel, but you can sort of imply that he did. And based on some other stuff that I found out, my personal opinion is that this had to do with the cartel. The individual who took out the hit had rented an Airbnb, left, had the Glock, 3 magazines, went to an area where there was no kids around, shot this man multiple times actually, and then changed his shirt so that when he went back to the Airbnb, it was like, he's trying to be undercover, I guess, hide his identity. And this man was from Quebec, and he took out this hit very, I guess, in a way, professional. It took a while for him to actually get caught by authorities. The thing is, the no children around, that is not really something new, but that is something very specific to the cartel. Because if you look at any other gang shootings, murders, or attempted murders in Canada, a lot of these hits are super unprofessional. I mean, I saw this, I'll never forget. There's a video, literally, and I reported on this. There's a shooting in a suburban city in the Lower Mainland, British Columbia. And after the guy commits the shooting, I don't even think he ends up killing the guy. He runs to the getaway car and the freaking doors are locked. I mean, come on, like the cartel operatives are not doing that. So I think that's why they're very specific. They're very specific with their instructions. And also in terms of the gun, I got a lot of questions about that, like why a Glock? Well, first of all, it's very discreet as opposed to like a long arm rifle. But second of all, you have to keep in mind gun laws in Canada are very strict. So any gun they're using is going to be illegal. It's going to be from the United States. And they're going to have to seek it out. They're going to have to find a straw buyer to bring them these arms, because acquiring arms in Canada is a very difficult process, particularly if you're going to be acquiring arms for a crime.
Sorry, you cut out the end, but I picked it up. So gun laws, what are the gun laws currently in Canada?
Okay, so in Canada, you have to basically get registered to be able to carry a firearm, and you cannot like carry a firearm on you. The only place that you can have a firearm is on your way to the gun range, at the gun range, or like in designated hunting areas. And the types of guns that you're allowed to have are very specified and based on your registration. The amount of guns that you can own once you're registered, and in order to become like a registered gun owner or licensed gun owner, perhaps, you have to go through a pretty strict process to be accepted to do this. Now, in reality, there are a lot of Canadians who own illegal firearms, and there are a lot of licensed, like people in Canada who are licensed to carry firearms who still actually acquire illegal firearms just because of the way that you can get guns. Like, it's always been a culture shock for me, even to this day, to be able to walk into a store in the United States and just like see guns and be able to buy them, because that's not the case in Canada whatsoever. It's extremely strict. And like gun ownership is a very small minority of the overall Canadian population. And like the largest population of Canadians that are owning guns are people living in sort of rural areas who are literally hunting and like using their kill or like prey to make food. Sorry, I'm like really not in that world.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's 100% okay. I don't pay attention to Canadian gun laws, so I was curious. But what I think is interesting is that, you as a reporter who frequents both countries, Mexico and Canada, and you know a lot about Canada, you've been there, and you're starting to see these patterns of these hits that are happening, and you're starting to investigate them. what is the Canadian government doing about it? Do they identify that this is cartel action, or are they just kind of blowing that like, no, it's not cartel, it's just another gang violence?
You see, this is a my perception of the justice system and law enforcement in Canada is not an uncommon one. It's very disappointing. There is really little to no crackdown. A lot of the policies are uh, very much about sort of like restorative justice and helping people out and saving the victim, which in theory is great. In practice, especially in Canada, it's not fucking working. And we have yet to see any sort of crackdown in terms of cartel activity in Canada. We actually, in my opinion, have yet to see any acknowledgement from Canadian law enforcement or federal government about cartel activity in Canada. And that's really problematic because literally just the other day I was watching a sort of round table where a bunch of politicians were asking each other questions. I tweeted about it, and a member of parliament asks the head of the RCMP, how many organized crime bodies are there individually operating in Canada? And he says, we don't have a number. I don't know. Which is completely untrue because prior to that, CSIS, which is the Canadian version of the CIA, released a report of there were 600 and something organized crime bodies operating in Canada. And they go on to name some of them, but this is another thing, there is this lack of transparency. For example, the American government will say, we are going to designate the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and we are going to name them for you. And they give you this like list. Okay, cool. I think it's missing some, but at least, we're on the right path, right? The Canadian government will never do this. Calling out an organized crime group by name, no, no, no. Actually, like digging into this, and I have a really solid source within the Canadian government in law enforcement who chats with me quite frequently to kind of give me the updates of what's going on, because really at this point I'm kind of the only person looking into that Canadian cartel connection, which is very strong. And I know it's strong because despite what a lot of numbers say that less than 1% of fentanyl is coming in from the Canadian border into the United States, that's bullshit. We know that. Like I could and I'm not afraid to say that because based on anyone that I talk to and any reporting that I do, if I really sat here right now and told you that less than 1% of fentanyl comes from Canada into the United States, I would be lying. That is just completely untrue. The cartel presence in Canada is so strong, and the lack of oversight from the Canadian government and Canadian law enforcement is so strong that at this point, I would call it impunity. No, I'm getting really passionate about this because it is really unfortunate and a lot of people are dying, and there's too many people in power who are rejecting this notion that the cartels operate in Canada. They do. I've talked to them. I've seen them. They are running so much of their operation in your northern neighbor that it would just be ridiculous to say it's untrue. And unfortunately, the Canadian justice system is just too weak to do anything about it because they don't even deal with domestic crime properly and domestic offenders properly. So I would just never see them actually dealing with Mexican cartel operatives or associates in Canada properly. I mean, I've actually looked into certain individuals who I know for a fact are working in organized crime and residing in Canada, and they have refugee status. They're running a significant portion of the drug business where they are, like in their region, and they have criminal records in Canada. And they're out living their best lives, driving around in luxury vehicles, continuing to operate their business. That's bullshit.
Yeah, that sounds like they found a little bit of a loophole that they can still do all the same things, but not in the United States, and in Canada, they're just gonna smack on the wrist and keep going.
It's definitely a bit more low key in terms of how they're operating compared to like when they were in Mexico, for example. But they are certainly taking advantage of the weak Canadian justice system. And you know what? For the first time, I will say I don't blame the narcos for that, because I would do the same shit. It's the fault of a weak Canadian justice system that really allows for absolutely zero consequences for people who are harming Canadian society.
I would love to get more Canadian experts on the podcasts. You know, we have you, but outside of that, I don't think we've ever really interviewed anyone who has a connection to Canada and the borders and the cartel, drugs, whatever it is. I don't think we've ever anyone. So this is a call out to the audience. If you know anyone, tag them. Let us know on X or wherever you see this. I'd be interested
Actually,
in interviewing more people.
an incredible crime reporter from Vancouver, same city I'm from, Kim Boland. She's been covering crime probably like in the nicest way for as long as I've been alive. Like I would say more than like, years. And her reporting is very thorough. And she was kind of the first person to clock that sort of Canada cartel connection, just because she's been so deeply entrenched in covering crime and gangs in Canada. I mean, the problem is typically as a journalist in Canada, it's really hard to invoke any change. You're kind of it's very bureaucratic, and when you're covering courts, when you're covering crime, I mean, at least for me, when I was doing it, it was very frustrating. It was very frustrating to see the lack of justice, and a lot of victims suffer for the rest of their lives, or lose their lives at the hands of people who were very violent and terrible people. And I can say that. I don't judge people by their worst mistakes, but there are some people who are just blatantly terrible people. And to face absolutely no justice. But Kim Boland is someone who really, she digs deep into that, and she's got some really solid sources.
Let me ask you this. I saw some kind of political stuff happening in Canada recently. What was that about? Are you familiar with that at all?
We had an election. We have a new prime minister. And this is like one thing to put out to the American audience here, right? So a liberal leader has been elected as the prime minister of Canada. Now, it's really important to understand that the Canadian Liberal Party does not match that of the American Democratic Party. It's very different. The Liberals of Canada are typically, I mean, really, other than our previous prime minister, Justin Trudeau, are typically more centrist, okay? Now, under Justin Trudeau, who was the prime minister for a decade, we saw a lot of changes, particularly when it came to, I guess, my biggest grievances, which are organized crime, addiction crisis, the resources for that. And so going forward, it'll be very interesting to see how this changes, just because Carney, our new prime minister, is quite different than the previous one. And he's actually supposed to meet with Trump this week, and he said that don't expect, the white smoke based on my first meeting with Trump. But I think that there should be more of a kind of common ground here. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. It's going to be really interesting. I don't vote. I don't participate in Canadian politics because it's just tough.
So from your perspective right now, you think you're interested in seeing what it's going to look like between Trump and the new prime minister? Are you, I guess all the Canadian people, are they hoping that they're going to crack down on violence? I know there's a big immigration issue out there. They just started realizing it more, and the Border Patrol up in Canada started to how do I say? They started to up their game on how to work a border based on we're having people coming in from America, but also other countries. So Canada, I know, is taking steps towards securing their borders a lot better. But I'm imagining when you're voting a new prime minister, you're looking at all the things, and the crime that's happening in Canada right now has to be one of the big ones that's trying to be addressed, right?
Listen, Canada's referred to as a cultural mosaic. It's extremely diverse, and I think that's incredibly beautiful. I mean, especially for me, right? Like my paternal family from Poland, my maternal family from India. You couldn't get more fucking mixed than that. So it's great. However, the lack of regulations around immigration has caused not only a big problem for a lot of Canadians struggling economically, But it's also caused more racism in a country that typically was not really like racist like that. I mean, people are gonna probably say that's cap, but whatever. Um,
For my older audience, cap means a
it's a
lie.
lie. Yeah. Sorry about that. But you know, I think that going forward, there will be a crackdown on immigration policies because towards the end of Justin Trudeau's term, we kind of saw him backtrack that in terms of like re-implementing a visa requirement for Mexican nationals, changing the protocol around Indian nationals coming into Canada, whether it's like for a student visa, a work and living visa. And so this started to change the work towards the end because in the beginning of his administration, he really loosened a lot of these policies, leading to this like immigration insurgence, which to be honest, I never really had a problem with in Canada because that's kind of the point of Canada. We have like a ton of land, not enough people. There's always like these government incentives to continue to like populate the country. So you need immigrants. Like it makes sense, okay? And like I come from a family of immigrants from two very different places, as do most Canadians. Like so okay, fair. But the way he led his policies just took Canadians down a road where a lot of people now are really struggling, and it's caused for a lot of animosity against new immigrants, and I can understand that. I covered a lot of this when I was still working at the national broadcaster in Canada. The amount of Canadian families who are using the food banks is absolutely ridiculous. It's a very high percentage, and it's middle class, even upper middle class families that are supplementing their weekly or monthly groceries with the food banks. And I can understand why, you know, a family like that would say, well, perhaps if we didn't have so many people coming in, and, you know, there's always a scapegoat. Um, but there is also at the same time poor policy that can lead to a deterioration of society's perception of immigration. And that's really unfortunate, especially in a country that's made up of immigrants, especially in a country that's very diverse and celebrates all cultures. I love it, to be honest. Like for me, you know, if I didn't grow up like that, I definitely would not speak all the languages that I do. I wouldn't be like this fake Mexican girl. To me, it's very beautiful. But I do understand Canadians' grievances with poor policies. Like, you know, an example that I said was the way a lot of cartel associates and members took advantage of the fact that they did not need a visa and they could easily apply and be granted refugee status to then operate in Canada. And this was particularly exacerbated during Trump's first term when he really cracked down on that southern border and that northern border was left wide open. So it'll be really interesting to see if this new Canadian federal government will look at the border as an issue. I think for right now their main concern is the economy, and Canadian voters, their number one concern in terms of voting was the economy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to pay attention to that and see how the drug trade potentially changes, shifts, slows down, or picks up with the new prime minister in. I know, you know, the Border Patrol makes their efforts in the northern border. I'm curious to see if the Border Patrol themselves pivot some of their strategy to the northern border. There's been a lot of talks of that. And so anything when you start putting more personnel on the line, you start slowing down the traffic, or they start trying to having to find a different route. And so it's very interesting times right now on the borders. But let's pivot real quick to your new venture, Dispatches.
Yes.
And yes. So tell us about
it. I love it. So, okay. You know, since this audience absolutely loves to hear me run my mouth, which I love to do, thankfully, Ironclad and Borderland is bringing me on to do my own dispatches where I am covering organized crime, the cartels, everything Mexico, United States from the front lines, which you guys love to see me boots on the ground, even though a lot of people say I'm not boots on the ground. Whatever. I am. You know, from the dead bodies in Sinaloa to the coyotes in Tijuana, we're going to be covering it all. And I'm going to be showing you firsthand because I love to be on the ground. I love to show you exactly what's going on. And my balls of steel permit that. So we're going to be showing you everything that's going on and everything that Vince is talking about and all of the issues that we cover on here. We're going to dive a little bit deeper and we're going to be as thorough as possible. So I'm really excited for this. You're going to see them twice a week. We're going to do these dispatches and I'll explain everything that's going on. I mean, for example, just recently, the U.S. Treasury just sanctioned 3 Mexican nationals, 3 brothers who are working for CG&G along the U.S. Mexico border near Texas um, for illegally importing stolen crude oil from Mexico, which is a huge racket that's been going on for years, and the US finally clocked it. So these days, we're going to go right there and we're going to show you exactly how this is happening, who's profiting off of it, who's suffering from it, and why it's happening. And I'm really excited. We're going to collab on this and we're just going to
It's
really,
gonna be good.
we're coming for the cartels. Vince and Katarina, here we go, baby.
I'm a little nervous when you say it that way, but no, but I'm excited because there's several things that I want to see if we can get you to do further investigations as well. We have a lot of contacts. I have a couple points of contact I want to get you connected to so you can kind of get there. I obviously can't travel as much as I want to, knowing that I have a day job and then my family and everything else. It's exciting to have someone who's young, who has a strong back and can do the work. There's a couple of ranches we're going to need you to go out there and check because we think their connection to CJ&G, all of it. Great. There's so much I'm excited about.
Are you fucking joking me? You know what? Write the speech right now for the funeral. That speech that they give is done.
I mean, look, in all honesty, in all honesty, we never want you to risk your life at all. You're a great journalist. You've been doing some great work down there. We just wanted to partner up and see how we can continue to bring this information to the audience who's really enjoying what we do here. And so I'm just happy to have an ally in the game.
And I do really appreciate that because especially being independent, I've been covering a lot of these really high risk topics. A lot of people don't understand this, but I've been doing this by myself. I went to Sinaloa for the first time by myself. I go and I follow the press releases. I follow the local press to really get to the bottom of it because I do have fear, but I do not let the fear impede me from doing the important job, right? Because I've gotten a lot of messages, especially recently, from people who follow my reporting. And I don't do this for validation, to make that clear. But when I do get messages from people who are like, my whole family is from Sinaloa. Thank you so much for going and covering this because we have not been seeing this going on lately. And everyone is suffering. Yeah. It really makes it worth it. And I understand, like, okay, Katarina, this is why you're doing this. It's telling the stories that go untold. It's talking to the people who feel like they don't have a voice and perhaps they do not. And it's bringing, all this information to light that a lot of people in positions of power want to see buried, dead in the dark. And I don't fuck with that. We need to tell the stories how they are. We need to keep the public informed, completely unbiased, but being critical and being thorough. I think that's the most important part of being a journalist. And I will never fail the audience on that. They may like it, they may not. I don't care. Like I said, we don't do this for validation. We do this to tell the stories that matter.
Love it. We're excited for it. I'm excited to see them. Anything you need from us, you already know. And if you're ever in the States, obviously I have contacts around the world. So if there's some kind of you need support in any capacity, just give us a ring and we'll get you covered.
Love that. Let's go, because apparently CG&G has a major lab in Kenya. So Africa, here we come, baby.
Really? Here we go. Again, Kat, thank you so much. We're excited for new dispatches to be coming out. We're excited to be partnering with you. Borderland's narcosis is only getting better. And again, thank you so much for your time today. And anytime you need, you have the platform to join us again, and let's keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vince. I'm very excited for this, and I hope everyone is ready for the craziest stories.
I'm nervous.
Stay informed, stay critical. That's what I always say.
Love it. Thank you for listening to Borderland Narcosis, an Ironclad original presented by First Form. Check out your supplements, guys. Trust me, they're the best in the world. I love them. Firstform.com/Borderland. Until next time, see you later.
New dispatches drop every Tuesday and Thursday starting May 20th. Watch Borderland Dispatches everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube at This is Ironclad.